Millionaire CEO laughed at the poor waitress until her bill revealed an incredible secret. The diner was bustling as usual, the clanking of plates and the sizzle of bacon filling the air. Sarah moved through the narrow aisles with practiced fluidity, her smile a shield against the exhaustion etched on her face. Each face was familiar: old Mr. Jenkins with his coffee black, Mrs. Roper with a side of toast. They relied on her warmth, her stories, as she relied on their steady support to make ends meet for her 2 kids at home. The simple life of a waitress was filled with laughter and camaraderie, yet in moments of quiet, the weight of her reality pressed hard. What if the world never changed for her children? What if they never knew happiness beyond these tired walls? Then, the doors swung open, and in walked Victor, a CEO dressed to the nines, surrounded by a gaggle of equally smug colleagues. The diner, radiant with warmth and worn charm, seemed to dim in his presence. The laughter faded, eyes shifted from plates to him, like moths to a flame, drawn in both admiration and contempt. He teased the space as if it were beneath him, his smile brittle as he scanned the room, finally landing on Sarah. "You really should aspire to more than serving pancakes," he scoffed, his laughter sharp, cutting through the ambience. The patrons froze, feeling the tension sizzle in the air. Sarah's body stiffened, heart racing, her breath caught in her throat. Dignity over pride, she whispered to herself, knowing this moment could tear her down, or build her up. She wanted to confront him, to show him the beauty in her sweat and struggles, but instead, she offered her notepad and a pen, taking their order with an unexpected poise. This disdain wouldn't shatter her, not now. She could feel their quiet judgment like a dagger, and behind it, the weight of her dreams of good schools, laughter at home, free from worried frowns pressed hard against her soul. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Victor's laughter echoed, the conversation drifted into the realm of class divides, the idea that hard work always rewards, yet she knew better. She poured fresh coffee, her hands steady but thoughts racing. How could they see not just this apron but the woman behind it? The mother who sacrificed so much. With each refill, a mix of bitterness and determination churned within her. Her mind screamed to remind them of the families and dreams wrapped in those greasy plates. Moments later, she returned to their table, the weight of the bill heavy in her palm, but even heavier was the note she had tucked inside. The revelation wrote itself in her heart: this bill held a secret that might shatter his facade. As Victor uncovered it, the laughter crashed, leaving behind an uneasy silence. His face paled, veins pulsing with recognition. She was the daughter of the artist who once inspired him. Suddenly, the divide between their worlds felt insurmountable. Victor was confronted not just with a name, but with the discomfort of his past, a mentor he underestimated, someone he once shrugged off in pursuit of ambition. The urgency of the diner filled the silence, patrons holding their breath as he faced her with newfound weight, searching for redemption. In the uneasy space between them, Sarah stood vulnerable yet resolute, yearning for acknowledgement of their shared humanity. Would he step forward to bridge this distance or retreat to the safety of his privilege? The heaviness of that moment hung in the air like smoke, and Sarah felt the intensity of every gaze piercing her. Victor's moment of recognition was more than just an internal reckoning, it reverberated through the diner, challenging everyone's perceptions. For Sarah, the path forward twisted with uncertainty, yet it also illuminated potential. The shame he projected suddenly became a reflection of their opposing realities, but what if it could also forge a connection? "I didn't know," Victor finally stammered, his bravado waning. The words were raw, stripped of corporate polish, revealing a glimpse of humanity beneath the hard exterior. Not that she felt compassion just yet. Instead, it sparked something potent within her, an opportunity not just to respond, but to reclaim her voice. She leaned closer, her tone steady. "You didn't care to know. With that, a fragile balance shifted. Gone was the interplay of power, in its place stood a reckoning grounded in their shared history. Sarah's heart raced as she reconsidered her next move. The revelation twisted in her mind. Here was a man fueled by ambition and arrogance forced to confront his past. What would she do with this power? Propelled by adrenaline, she made a decision she would not collapse into a victim. Instead, she de-wheeled her story to foster understanding. Your success came at a price, she continued, her voice calm but firm. What are you going to do with it? The challenge rang out in the cramped space, each patron captivated. She saw disbelief flicker across his face before it settled into contemplation. He had dismissed her, demeaned her. Yet now, the door swung open for negotiation, for a conversation stripped of pretense, caught between vulnerability and strength. Sarah's thoughts spiraled. Doubts crept in, urging her to retreat to the familiar path. A safe smile, laughter forced to dissolve the tension. But could she afford to step back now? A part of her craved the stability of routine while another battled to embrace something greater, the possibility of change. Victor's response rolled off his tongue almost involuntarily. I've always strived for progress, but maybe I've lost sight of what that truly means. Suddenly, he appeared smaller, unarmed against her truth. It was a palpable admission that ignited something within her. Could this be an inflection point not just for him, but for her as well? A chance to advocate for herself and her dreams, to entwine their narratives in a mutually beneficial quest for understanding. As silence enveloped them, Sarah felt the passion surging. Then let us start with acknowledging the worth in every laborer, in every story leading to success. It's not just clout, it's a network, a history. She almost hesitated at the potential of her own boldness. Was she damning herself in this moment? Or was it the beginning of a burgeoning connection, both professional and deeply personal? Victor seemed to grapple with how to respond, and she observed as his expression shifted. Just as he opened his mouth perhaps to dismiss, perhaps to embrace her, 3 regular customers chimed in. We've seen her work. Mrs. Roper's voice broke through the tension. She deserves more than just laughter at her expense. And just like that, Sarah gained unexpected allies in the very patrons whose trust she sought to uphold daily. Support flowed in, not from periphery acquaintances but from the people she nurtured with the same care she shown her children. In that moment, Sarah became a central figure, no longer a mere waitress beneath bright lights. She stood poised at the crossroads, asking herself what she would demand from this confrontation. The reality of their intertwined fate settled thick in the air. No longer just a reflection of societal positions, it was an open negotiation for respect and a deeper dialogue about aspirations. Let us talk in a way that values everyone's experience, she urged Victor, her heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. It was time to turn the page, and she sensed his willingness could blossom into a partnership that defied their current divides. But would he take that leap with her, or would his fear of change push him back into the safety of indifference? The anticipation gripped her tightly as they stood on the brink of redefining what both success and relationships could mean. As their eyes locked, she read the struggle etched on his features, marking the moment with riveting potential. Victor's next words could either shatter her newfound confidence or reinforce it, leading her down a path she couldn't yet foresee. The pause stretched, thick with uncertainty. Sarah sensed the weight of the diner's collective breath held in anticipation, and every second felt like an eternity. In Victor's eyes, a turmoil brewed, a tempest of personal reflection and professional stakes. The flicker of vulnerability still lingered, challenging the fortress of his ego. His reply came, brittle yet deliberate. You're right. I've overlooked the people who make my success possible. Look around us. I've been blinded. Her heart raced, a rush of adrenaline pierced the self-doubt that had previously anchored her. Could this be the pivotal moment she had longed for? Her instincts screamed caution, but another part of her clamored for resoluteness. Perhaps she had never fully understood what it meant to confront intimidation head-on. Victor's moment of reckoning could shift the landscape for both of them. What do you plan to do about it? She pressed, her voice skimmed the edges of daring, urging him to articulate the change that must accompany his recognition. There was power in her challenge, a newfound authority she barely recognized. The room held its breath as Victor sighed, the tension unraveling as he seemed to find solace in her challenge. I need to engage with every voice I've ignored. This is not just about me anymore, it's about building something better. In that moment, Sarah found herself standing at a crossroad between skepticism and hope. Could Victor truly see beyond the corporate gloss? Those generous words chiseled a pathway where once there had been wall upon wall of indifference. Yet lurking behind his admission was a flicker of uncertainty. How deeply could change permeate the heart of an executive? Was she naive to believe in this transformation? With an iron resolve, she stepped closer, willing to be a catalyst. Then let us show them. Let us create a dialogue that roots itself in respect, in real humanity. Let us create something bigger than us. Victor's eyebrows knitted in contemplation. Their shared histories morphed into a new foundation, yet the prospect of action stirred another wave of vulnerability within her. It was daring, and she felt the heat of insecurity rise in her chest, punctured by small, insistent voices questioning her audacity. Was she ready to invite him into a partnership that might mean exposing her dreams to scrutiny? Actions echoed deeper than words. Can you commit to engaging with us? Not just at this table, but in your business practices. Every decision you make impacts lives far beyond the boardroom. Behind Victor's eyes, emotion flickered: fear, awareness, resolve. I never comprehended the ripples of my choices. If I can start here, I'd be willing to open my office to stories like yours. It was monumental, yet Sarah knew this was only an ember smoldering in the dark. Could she trust that it would ignite change, or would it dissipate just as swiftly where the flames of industry churned? Victor's commitment held weight, but it lacked a tangible path, a map that would navigate their burgeoning alliance. She needed to ground this new dynamic in actionable terms. Let us create a plan, a way to ensure your words transform into real policies that reflect this understanding. I can help bridge the gap between you and those you've overlooked. Victor hesitated for a heartbeat, the idea swirling around him before solidifying into resolve. Let us do it. I'll make it my priority. As they looked at one another, two individuals at opposing ends of a spectrum realizing a potential partnership, the air hummed with electricity. Sarah's heart surged with excitement and dread. This was the turning point she had so desperately sought, yet fear whispered of the challenges ahead. As the other patrons murmured their support, she felt a rush of collective strength. Perhaps this wasn't just a leap of faith for Victor, it was equally a choice for her to redefine the contours of her own life. Let us meet tomorrow, she proposed, the urgency tightening her voice. We'll draft a plan, outline our next steps. Victor nodded, determination dawned. Tomorrow. Then. It's time for action. But as this possibility bloomed like spring after a long winter, Sarah understood that the true test lay ahead. Would Victor stay the course, or slip back into old habits? Each choice they made from this moment would either erect a bridge between their worlds or expose the fractures lurking beneath the surface. The realization sank in, vulnerability would accompany them both on this uncertain journey. With one final glance, Sarah recognized the enormity of what awaited them. She wasn't simply standing on the brink of change, she was about to plunge into a reality where every decision held weight far greater than personal ambition. Yet, as their conversation drew to a close, an unshakable doubt persisted. Could collaboration truly surpass competition? The answer felt tantalizingly near, but tomorrow would reveal whether they were prepared to confront both challenges and triumphs head-on. Sarah awoke the next morning with an unsettling mix of excitement and trepidation fluttering in her chest. The sun filtered through her curtains, illuminating the chaotic path of her thoughts. Last night's conversation replayed in her mind. Victor's admission had been a crack in his armor, but she wondered if she could help him transform that vulnerability into something real and lasting. She dressed quickly, choosing a simple blouse that reflected her assertiveness. Each button fastened felt like a small step toward a new chapter, both personally and professionally. But as the minutes ticked down to their meeting, anxiety gnawed at her. Was she truly ready for the mantle of change she was about to take on? Arriving at Victor's office, she absorbed the external facade of wealth and power. It was a testament to the corporate world she aimed to penetrate, yet it felt alien against the simplicity of her stature. As the elevator chimed at her floor, she inhaled deeply, bracing herself for the unpredictable tide of their collaboration. Victor's office was expansive, lined with sleek artwork and panoramic views of the city below. He stood by the window, gazing out as if searching for answers in the skyline. The moment he turned, the residue of uncertainty clung to him. "Good morning, Sarah," he greeted, tension lacing his voice. "Ready to dive in?" "Absolutely," she replied, energy bubbling beneath her professional exterior. "Let us outline how we can make your commitment tangible." They settled at a large conference table. Pens poised, Sarah felt invigorated by the challenge ahead. Each decision they documented would not merely serve as policy, they would echo the hopes of those Victor had overlooked for so long. "What are the key areas you think we should address first?" she asked, flipping open a notepad. Victor hesitated. "I suppose my focus has always been on profitability. If we want to engage deeply, I need to understand what those people actually need." "Precisely," she responded, sensing the weightiness of his words. "But you've got to be willing to peel back layers and embrace discomfort. It won't just be about improving figures on a spreadsheet." "We can start with employee engagement programs," he suggested, his brow furrowing. "Maybe host listening sessions, ask for feedback directly." "Great start," she encouraged, jotting down his ideas. "But what are we doing to ensure real change occurs afterward?" "Feedback must translate into actionable outcomes." Victor was silent, challenged by the prospect of maintaining accountability. Sarah noticed the shift in his demeanor. He was used to dictating paths rather than charting them collaboratively. "We can set benchmarks and track progress," he finally stated, his resolve strengthening. Yet, Sarah sensed a conflict within him, a fear that the vulnerability he had shown might open the door to criticism from his peers, or worse, failure. "Let us not just create numbers on a page," she pressed on. "Let us define what success looks like on a human level. If we engage their voices, the benefits will naturally follow." Intrigued, Victor leaned back in his chair, contemplating her words. The silence settled thickly, pregnant with possibility. "What if I falter?" he asked, vulnerability creeping into his voice again. "What if they see me as a fraud, backtracking into old habits?" "Fear is normal," Sarah replied, her voice steady but empathetic. "You can embrace it and transform it into your driving force. But you must be ready to walk the uncomfortable path." The conversation evolved around strategies, action points, and timelines, yet beneath it all, a current of unspoken apprehension lingered in the air. As they dissected his executive responsibilities, Sarah felt herself shifting into a role she had never anticipated, a mentor to Victor as much as a partner. But just as they began to sketch the outline of their plan, Victor's phone buzzed with a notification, cutting through the intensity of their discussion. The interruption jolted them both back to reality, and Sarah felt her heart race again. The stakes were real. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting. "I have a meeting scheduled with the board this afternoon. I should run through the progress you and I have initiated." A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. What if they push back? "Have you considered how to prepare yourself to fend off their skepticism?" "I'll be honest about my intentions, which feels daunting," he admitted. "But I want them to understand this isn't an isolated decision. I believe they need to hear the voices of the people." The courage in Victor's admission was both exhilarating and distressing. But as she stared at her notes, the uncertainty she had felt before collided with a glimmer of resolve. "Just remember, winning them over isn't about you being perfect, it's about being genuine," Sarah advised. "Expect pushback. It's what fuels advancement." Victor nodded knowingly, yet an air of dread loomed large. They fell into a contemplative silence, two individuals poised on the brink of significant change yet burdened by the possible repercussions. what awaited Victor right after their plan was put into motion could reveal the stark truth of his commitment to growth or plunge them both into a new abyss. Could Sarah trust him to withstand the corporate storm? With their plan now taking shape, the true test of character was just beginning. Would they be ready to face the challenges that corporate culture might throw their way, or would doubt undermine their ambitions before they even started? All this simmered beneath them as they drew in breaths, preparing for the unpredictable tide ahead. As the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers, casting elongated shadows across the office, Sarah's heart raced with anticipation and apprehension. The brief silence had morphed into a palpable uncertainty that seemed to stretch in every direction around them. Victor shifted in his seat, running a hand through his hair, as if trying to brush away the weight of the impending board meeting. What if they don't accept the changes we're proposing? I've built a career on more traditional metrics. Then we pivot, Sarah replied, her voice firm but compassionate. We learn from it. Every setback is an opportunity to understand what's at stake and what can be improved. The conviction in her tone surprised even her. It bore the reflection of her own battles and decisions to overcome doubts. Her thoughts drifted momentarily to her past. The transition from a cashier to a managerial position had felt insurmountable. The whispers of self-doubt had echoed around her, but she had learned to navigate through that fog by grounding herself in the belief that her voice mattered. Perhaps this was her moment to guide Victor toward that same realization. Okay, Victor nodded slowly, his brow still wrinkled with conflict. Let's say we face resistance. What's my backup plan? I can't just wade through a hostile environment without a strategy. The challenge resonated within her, reminding her of the countless times she had prepared for confrontations. You need to cultivate allies. Look for those on the board who value employee input. Highlight how investing in team morale translates into real profits, not just numbers but loyalty that fuels productivity and innovation. Victor hesitated, peering at her as if he were assessing the authenticity of her conviction. Are you sure it can work? These people hold significant power. What if they dismiss it all as idealism? Then we turn idealism into measurable outcomes, she replied, igniting her resolve. Use the feedback from your employees as a testament. Show the board what happens when voices that once went unheard are finally acknowledged. That's real data, Victor. The way she presented her plan ignited something in him. Sarah wasn't merely an advisor, she was an agent of change by pushing him out of his comfort zone. She recognized how pivotal this was, not just for Victor but for her own growth in the corporate realm. Could she become the catalyst for a transformative shift in a powerful organization? Victor's phone buzzed again, a stark reminder of the time ticking away. As they prepped for the presentation, Sarah took a moment to cultivate her thoughts. The air hung thick with the anticipation of change, but the potential for rejection was equally potent. Each note she jotted down felt like laying a brick in the foundation of this new endeavor. Be sure to enlist their feedback actively during the presentation. Ask them point-blank how they perceive the current environment. It's about more than just your credibility, it's about building trust. Victor's face softened, as though he was beginning to envision the strength of their combined efforts. You might actually have something there, Sarah. I've focused so much on being the authoritative figure, I neglected the importance of shared governance. That's what leadership is all about: collaboration, vulnerability, and a willingness to change, Sarah articulated. You're not just there to make decisions, you're there to facilitate them. That's where the real accountability lies. But her internal doubts flickered beneath her burgeoning confidence. Could she truly help him navigate this crucible? Each moment felt charged, revealing the thin line between ambition and accessibility. Would Victor embrace this newer version of himself, or would fear tether him to his past? As they readied for the meeting, Victor's newfound determination ignited a flicker of hope within her. This was no longer simply about Victor's journey, it was about her evolution to how she saw herself in this world. Just before leaving, Victor locked eyes with her, a nervous energy palpable in the air. Sarah, if I don't convince them. His voice trembled, betraying a vulnerability that contradicted his corporate persona. Focus on what will move them, that's your best armor, she reassured him, her heart pounding. If you believe in it, they will eventually recognize that belief. Their exchange crystallized something fundamental. They were on the brink of a transformation that could redefine corporate culture, even if it was often shadowed by cynicism. As they departed, the gravity of the moment hung heavily between them. The boardroom awaited, but so too did the uncertainties that could either propel them forward or scatter their ambitions into the ether. Within that bubbling tension, one thought echoed in Sarah's mind: if Victor faltered, what would that reveal about her influence, her ambitions, and her own reflections of courage? She took a deep breath as they stepped into the elevator, the subtle flicker of a challenge glimmering on the horizon. Would they find the breakthrough they sought, or would failure reveal a deeper truth? The meeting was looming closer, and with it, the possibility of unraveling not just corporate resistance, but also the layers of courage that lay dormant within her. Would she step into the light or retreat into the shadows? As they stepped into the boardroom, the atmosphere shifted. It felt electric, almost suffocating, as Victor took his seat at the head of the table. Sarah positioned herself beside him, hyper-aware of the weight of her own presence. This wasn't merely a meeting. This was a crucible, an opportunity to carve out futures both for Victor and herself amidst the polished wood of corporate culture. The board members settled, exchanging glances that read like a foreign language to her, one of skepticism and self-importance. Sarah's pulse quickened. The stakes had escalated, and she was acutely aware that each breath she took was soaked in potential. Victor cleared his throat before launching into their presentation, his voice steady but laced with tension. As he detailed the proposed changes, Sarah caught the interested expressions of a few board members, yet the atmosphere remained thick with doubt. Dismay washed over her as she recognized the familiar symptoms of resistance surfacing: side conversations, barely concealed eye rolls, even subtle glances at watches. Yet their dynamics began to shift when Victor turned to Sarah. "I want to invite our workforce into the conversation. Please share the voices that matter most, those we want to represent," he said, granting her space to speak. In that moment, she grasped how critical this was. Her heart thrummed in her chest. This was her chance to showcase the insights she'd gathered from employees, the ones trapped in mediocrity by the very systems Victor sought to shift. Sarah launched into her narrative, weaving stories of resilience and innovation that echoed the struggles of those at the ground level. "When employees feel valued, their commitment skyrockets," she asserted, urgency threading her voice. As she spoke, she noticed the board's skepticism start to fade. A few members exchanged looks of intrigue. Had she struck some chord within them? She leaned into it, recounting how a team's morale directly propels the company's success. This had become her own mantra, the catalyst fueling her transformation from cashier to leader. Yet amidst her growing confidence lay an unsettling thought. Would they accept it as mere rhetoric? These elites often viewed compassion and empathy as weaknesses embellished by sentimentality. Sarah had never craved sales figures or market shares. She was here to underscore the untapped potential of human capital, the labor ignored for far too long. As Sarah wrapped up, Victor nodded appreciatively, though she was also keenly aware of the silence left in its wake. The board remained still, a collective breath held in anticipation. Then, a voice emerged. "And if employees start demanding more?" It came from Jonathan, a long-standing member known for his hardline approach. "Are we talking about collaboration or chaos?" In that instant, dread flickered within her. The stakes had escalated, and the challenge had transformed into a direct confrontation. She could feel Victor tensing beside her, his earlier resolve wavering. Was this how their moment of truth would unravel? Sarah felt her instincts propel her forward. Demanding more is not chaos, Jonathan. It's engagement. When we listen, when we respond, we foster loyalty. Isn't that what we want? Her tone, confident yet diplomatic, bridged the gap between her knowledge and his skepticism. The exchange escalated, the board members debating the merits of her points, lacing their questions with an undertone of incredulity toward change. Sarah realized this was no longer just about Victor's leadership, it touched the core of who she had become. Each inquiry was a test, a trial by fire that pushed her to confront her own fears of inadequacy. As the meeting unfolded, Sarah accepted the discomfort as a necessary companion on this journey. The back-and-forth debate unveiled truths she had buried: the fear that even if she succeeded today, there would always be new battles to fight. What did success really mean if a part of her still felt like an imposter? The clock ticked relentlessly in the backdrop, and each second that passed agitated the tension in the room. But instead of retreating, she leaned into the challenge, driven by the realization that her words had power. The stakes were higher than just Vic's career or her fledgling ambitions. They were reshaping the narrative of employee voices within the company. As they neared the end of the meeting, Sarah felt a shift. The pencil stubbing on paper lessened as Victor commanded the final moments with clarity. But that lingering dread tugged at her. Had they truly made an impact, or had she merely reinforced an evolving stalemate? The meeting concluded, though the echoes of their debate hung in the air. Sarah caught Victor's eye, and the mix of exhilaration and apprehension mirrored her own. They had ignited the conversation, but the path forward felt precarious, filled with hurdles yet to overcome. As they exited the boardroom, a single thought burned fiercely in her mind. If they returned to the status quo, what would that mean not just for them, but for all those employees who dared to dream of change? Would their spark of courage extinguish before it ever really ignited? These questions loomed larger as they stepped back into the ordinary world of the office, where hopes could be shattered or fanned into flame. The challenge that lay ahead was not merely about convincing the board, it was about summoning the strength to propel their vision with unwavering determination. What awaited them as they walked back down the corridor? Would they unleash the wave of change, or would they find themselves trapped in the confines of the past? As they walked back down the corridor, Sarah's mind raced. The board had engaged, yet she couldn't shake the sense of unfulfilled potential. Each step echoed the message she had tried to convey: the future felt heavy with possibility yet burdened by uncertainty. She could feel Victor's presence beside her, a steadying force, but also a reminder that they stood on the precipice of something unprecedented. "Sarah," he said, breaking through her thoughts, "you held your ground in there. I admire how you turned that challenge into a moment of clarity." His words were encouraging, yet Sarah felt an undercurrent of doubt tugging at her. Was she really ready to champion this mission, to demand change when she herself was still grappling with her place at that table? "Thanks, Victor," she replied, her voice steadying, though her heart beat a little faster. "But the real challenge begins now. I need to make sure those conversations don't fade." She contemplated the long hours she had spent gathering employee insights, the notes scribbled in the margins of her thoughts. The corporate hierarchy often stifled real engagement. She had witnessed too many voices go unheard. As they reached their office, she found herself staring at the large window overlooking the city, the skyline a testament to ambition. It was a landscape that mirrored her ambitions and fears, shining yet daunting. "How do we ensure this doesn't stop here?" she asked, a question aimed more at herself than Victor. "Let's start by creating a forum, something where employees feel safe to express their ideas," he proposed, his brow furrowing in concentration. "We can devise a plan to integrate their feedback into our strategy moving forward." The proposal ignited a spark within Sarah. It was a tangible step, an opportunity to not only give a voice to those she represented but to cultivate her own role as a leader. Yet as they brainstormed, doubts began to creep in again. Who was she to push for such a change? She had once been that waitress, barely scraping by, a stranger to the corridors of power. Would her colleagues truly see her as someone capable of facilitating this dialogue? That lingering imposter syndrome whispered incessantly that perhaps she was overstepping her bounds. "Victor," she hesitated, "what if they resist? What if they see this as just another initiative that won't lead anywhere?" Her anxiety pulsed through her, and she clenched her fists at the thought of failing those who had put their trust in her. "Resistance is part of transformation," he countered gently, leaning in. "Change doesn't come easily, but if we commit to genuine dialogue, we might just start to shift the culture. Remember, it's about fostering trust. You have earned their respect." His unwavering belief in her reignited her determination. She considered his words that respect held the key. Perhaps her journey from cashier to collaborator endowed her with a unique perspective that could bridge the gap between the boardroom and the break room. Those memories of her struggles now felt less like a burden and more like a source of strength. Fueled by this newfound resolve, Sarah decided to approach her colleagues, not as a superior but as a trusted ally. She envisioned creating smaller groups, discussions that would empower employees to voice their opinions openly. The idea blossomed, and with each detail she mapped out, she felt her self-doubt dissipating. "Let us outline some initiatives together, something actionable," she proposed, enthusiasm coloring her voice. Victor nodded, and they began the process of transforming an abstract idea into a concrete plan, but just as excitement surged within her, the phone in Victor's office rang, jolting her back to reality. She felt a sense of foreboding, a recognition that amid this hopeful momentum, there lay a looming threat. Would the board accept their initiatives, or would they backslide into complacency? The answer hung in the balance, and with it, her self-belief wavered. As they prepared for the next step, determined to march forward, an unexpected weight settled in Sarah's chest. Past experiences lingered at the edge of her mind, each representative of an unanswered question. What would happen when they faced the hardest hurdles, the backlash from those resistant to change? Would they be strong enough to withstand it together? As the sun began to set, bathing the walls in warmth, Sarah took a deep breath. The horizon hinted at promise but also uncertainty. What if this push for change brought unanticipated challenges? What further trials awaited them just around the corner? In that moment, she realized that she stood at the crossroads of transformation, not just for her colleagues but for herself. Embracing the turbulence of her own doubts might prove to be the greatest catalyst of all. Little did she know, the real confrontation with her fears loomed just ahead, poised to shape her evolution as a leader in ways she could hardly imagine. The following morning, Sarah arrived at the office with a renewed sense of purpose tinged with urgency. She could no longer allow her inner fears to dictate her trajectory. The strategies she envisioned needed to materialize and gain traction, otherwise, they would become mere words, lost to the winds of corporate indifference. As she sat at her desk, outlining the logistics for the employee forums, voices echoed in her mind, a chorus of doubts and insecurities undermining her growing resolve. Would the board truly sanction an initiative designed to bring forth the unheard voices? Would the employees embrace this opportunity, or would they regard her approach with skepticism? She pushed the fears away, knowing that indecision would only spiral into inertia. Instead, she focused on her task. Her planning became sharper, more meticulous. She drafted an email to the department heads, outlining her ideas and inviting them to participate in the meetings. Each click of the keyboard felt like a small emancipation, a step away from the constraints that had, until now, held her back. Yet even as she typed, a gnawing anxiety unfurled. What if someone challenged her authority? Would her colleagues remember her humble beginnings and dismiss her efforts as naive? Those thoughts almost halted her progress, but just as panic threatened to eclipse her voice, memories of her previous struggles surfaced, a more profound realization. Her experience was not a liability but an asset. People craved authenticity, they could sense a leader who understood the daily grind. With conviction, she clicked send. The hours passed slowly, an amalgamation of anticipation and trepidation. Sarah paced her office, rehearsing how she would frame the upcoming forums. She envisioned the discussions, the face-to-face interactions, the shared laughter, and the inevitable tensions that would arise. The prospect of such personal engagement energized her, yet that initial pulse of excitement was soon interrupted by the sound of the door swinging open. Victor stepped in, concern etched on his face. "I just received word from the board about our proposal," he declared. The gravity of his tone instantly stifled the lightness within Sarah. "They appreciate the initiative, but..." "But what?" she pressed, her heart racing. "They want to see a more detailed blueprint first. They're not entirely sold on the need for change, and they're wary of employee-driven decisions." The ground beneath her seemed to shift. "So, they're hesitant to give us the go-ahead?" He nodded soberly. "It's a setback, but we can use this as fuel. We've got to demonstrate the necessity of these discussions." We need metrics, testimonials, examples. A heavy sigh escaped her lips. As exhilarating as it had felt to take the first steps, the stark reality of her position now loomed over her. This was not just about convincing the employees but also about persuading the gatekeepers of her vision. What if they see it as an imposition rather than an invitation? She asked, wrestling with the internal storm brewing within her. The thought of failing before she had truly begun terrified her. Then we frame it differently, Victor suggested, his voice firm yet assuring. We highlight that this isn't merely an initiative, it's an evolution, the chance to empower everyone involved. We need to make the case that fostering an open dialogue can lead to tangible results. His confidence strengthened her resolve, yet lingering doubts threatened to resurface. What if they failed to convince the board? Each overturned obstacle felt larger than the last, each moment a test of her resilience. Simply having the board's endorsement had become the new battleground. I'll start gathering more evidence, success stories from other companies, employee feedback, anything we can leverage, Sarah declared, determination shrouding her doubts for the moment. Her focus shifted. If she could exhibit the potential hidden within the company, she could reclaim the narrative of change. As the day faded into evening, Sarah remained at her desk, piecing together the elements of her pitch. With each statistic and account she compiled, an empowering realization dawned on her. This wasn't just about changing office dynamics, it was about redefining her own narrative, confronting her professional identity head-on. But just as she thought she had a handle on the situation, a troubling realization hit her. If she was to lead this endeavor, she would have to confront the very people she once quietly served. The idea of standing before those who viewed her as merely a former waitress sent jolts through her core. This was more than an initiative, it was a personal reconciliation of her past and the authority she sought to wield. As she prepared her notes for the next morning's meeting, a sense of foreboding settled in. The only path to overcoming the board's resistance lay in unmasking the power her colleagues held collectively. But would her own insecurities prevent her from asking the questions that truly demanded answers? With that uncertainty dancing in her mind, Sarah took a breath and leaned back in her chair, realizing the real confrontation awaited her at the intersection of aspiration and fear. Embracing this moment would require navigating the turbulent waters of her insecurities, steering toward the possibility of transformation that shimmered just out of reach. What would she uncover within both herself and the culture of the company as the fight for change began in earnest? The sunlight filtered through the blinds as Sarah entered the conference room the next morning, her heart racing. She had meticulously prepared her presentation overnight, yet with each step towards the podium, the weight of her insecurities grew heavier. The board was gathered faces she had once served as a waitress now scrutinizing her as a manager. This was the moment she had both yearned for and dreaded. Drawing in a deep breath, she forced herself to push through the apprehension. Memories of her past, the long shifts, the dismissive looks muddled her thoughts, but the flickering flame of resolve steeled her spine. This wasn't just about a forum, it was about ownership, her right to voice a vision. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite the tremors within. "Thank you all for making the time today." She glanced at Victor, who offered a supportive nod from the back of the room. As Sarah transitioned into her presentation, the air thickened with tension. She articulated the core aim of empowering employees to share their voices, to foster a culture of dialogue and collaboration. Her words brimmed with conviction as she unveiled compelling statistics illustrating employee engagement and retention metrics that could convince even the most cynical board member. Studies have shown that companies prioritizing open communication see a 30% increase in performance, she continued, noticing some board members leaning in. This is not just about change for the sake of change, it's about creating an environment where every employee feels valued and heard. Questions soon followed, and each inquiry ignited a new wave of doubt. How do we know they'll actually participate? One board member challenged, skepticism sharp in his tone. "Let me show you," Sarah replied, her heart hammering in her chest. "I gathered feedback from our employees, and the results are clear, they're eager for a forum. They want to contribute, to innovate, but they feel unheard." She highlighted testimonials, weaving in the complex emotions those employees had expressed: frustration, excitement, a longing for connection. As she spoke, a strange sense of belonging settled over her. This was not merely an initiative, it was her battle cry, yet as the board deliberated afterward, a shadow of doubt crept back in. She listened as they weighed her proposal against their preconceived notions, their pragmatism gripping the discussion like a vice. What if this opens the floodgates to chaos? A senior member questioned. We have a protocol to maintain. Sarah's heart sank. Didn't they see? The chaos they feared was already here, lurking in the silence of unheard voices. She needed to respond, to challenge their perspectives. Wouldn't it be more chaotic to ignore the source of discontent? This is a chance to manage that chaos by bringing it into the light. By listening, we can transform dissatisfaction into actionable insights. The room went silent. She could almost feel the internal conflict among the board members, the hesitation trembling just beneath their firm exteriors. Would they push forward with her proposal, or would fear push them back into the shadows? With her heart racing, she could see a pivotal crossroads ahead. This was the moment she had to decide. Would she back down if they decided against her? Or would she stand firm in her belief that change was not just necessary, but the only option? As they began to discuss logistics, Sarah felt a flicker of empowerment, a burgeoning self-awareness that she could harness. She was no longer defined by her past but was reclaiming her identity as a leader. Still, doubt clawed at the edge of her thoughts. The board was still hesitant, she sensed their uncertainty around what the forums might unveil. Determined, she resolved to advocate not just for the project, but for herself and her past. The meeting was still in flux, and the outcome uncertain, but as voices rose in conversation, one question loomed ominously in her mind: if she could transform the corporate culture, could she also rewrite the narrative of her own life? The fight was no longer just for the forums, it was a fight for her own recognition, for validation that she was the architect of her future. As her mouth opened to share her next point, the tension crescendoed, the words caught in her throat. Would she confront the unraveling doubts that haunted her, or would she allow them to tighten the grip of her past? It was time to face the truth. True empowerment would come only when she accepted both the struggle and the triumph that defined her journey. What would she need to confront next to truly pave her way forward? As Sarah prepared to make her case, a dawning realization settled within her, a dichotomy of fear and strength. The boardroom, traditionally a world of authority detached from human emotion, was now her stage. She took a deep breath, each inhalation steadying her resolve. Today, we have the opportunity to redefine our approach to leadership, she declared, confidence spilling into her tone. Let us engage with our employees not just as subordinates but as partners in progress. Her voice resonated, powerful yet intimate, darting across the room into the ears of her critics and allies. Victor's presence felt like a sturdy foundation as she articulated the necessity of change. She wove in her personal story the journey from a waitress to a pivotal figure articulating the value of every laborer. I know what it's like to feel invisible, she said, locking eyes with the board members. That feeling permeates our business, our culture. Until we acknowledge those with hands in the kitchen and voices in the break room, we're ignoring our lifeblood. This time, she didn't hesitate when doubts whispered. Instead, she pointedly addressed the skepticism in the room. We've already seen disengagement impact our metrics negatively. The silence is the real issue. It's suffocating innovation. By facilitating these forums, we're not manufacturing chaos, we're harnessing creativity. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the attendees. She could feel their reservations wavering, possibly transforming into curiosity. They were beginning to perceive the merit in her proposal not just as an initiative, but as a critical component of their corporate DNA. The board engaged in a heated discussion, opinions volleying back and forth. As momentum built, Sarah seized this opportunity to present data from other companies successfully implementing similar employee-driven dialogues. Statistics grounded her assumption, but it was the human element that ignited her passion. Change begins with understanding. Listening isn't merely a box to check, it's a philosophy. Let us embrace it. Amidst the back and forth, Jonathan, the same board member who had doubted her credibility before, leaned forward thoughtfully. What you've presented fosters mutual respect and reciprocity. But how do we ensure this translates into actionable results? In that moment, the fear that had once seemed insurmountable fortified her voice. We draw a direct line from engagement to performance enhancement. Those who feel valued outperform expectations, leading to elevated productivity and retention. It's a win-win. As the board continued to murmur, Sarah felt the unmistakable thrill of shifting tides. This was her moment not just for the employees she spoke for, but for herself. She had transformed from marginalized to influential. The journey had reinvigorated her faith in her abilities. She was no longer the waitress dismissed in the diner, she embodied the bridge of solutions. When the meeting concluded, the board secured the resolution to pilot the forums. A spark ignited in the room, accompanied by a round of reluctant applause as they recognized the potential of fostering an engaged workforce. Stepping outside, she felt elation coursing through her veins. Victor turned to her, awe brushing his features. You were incredible. You led us into uncharted territory. And you stood beside me, every step of the way, she replied, a genuine smile illuminating her face. This was mutual trust and alliance formed in adversity. Every sleepless night, every whisper of doubt had coalesced into triumphant purpose. By the time she left the office that day, Sarah knew she'd established herself not only in Victor's eyes but in the eyes of her colleagues as well. As she walked through the bustling streets, the world around her absorbed the beauty of transformation, and so had she that no longer tethered to self-doubt. She had accomplished something momentous. She had forged her identity through vulnerability and courage. Defying previous societal expectations and her personal limitations, she emerged, resolute and empowered. As they drove home, her thoughts crystallized around both personal and professional achievements. She had not only transcended the limitations of her upbringing but had become a catalyst for change within a corporate framework. Her phone buzzed, a reminder of the countless voices awaiting acknowledgement. A feeling of invigoration surged within her as she contemplated the future. Engaging not only Victor but every employee, she could lead the charge toward reshaping culture, demonstrating that transformation begins with listening. The thrill of impact coursed through her. She embraced the newfound power to create meaningful change, both in her life and the lives of others. This was just the beginning. Now, armed with this resolve, she carried forward. The challenges that lay ahead paled in comparison to the experience she now embodied. What was coming next was no longer a series of daunting obstacles but an expedition into possibility. With each step ahead, Sarah embraced her journey not simply out in the world but deeply within herself. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.